I'm Marcus Williams, a software developer who works mostly from home. I mind my business, keep my lawn mowed, and generally try to be a decent neighbor. My house is in Oak Ridge Estates, a pleasant suburb with well-maintained properties and, unfortunately, an overzealous HOA board with too much time on their hands. When I bought my house 3 years ago, everything seemed perfect. The previous owners had converted the garage into a home office with large windows, perfect for my remote work setup. There was still enough space to park one car, with a detached carport in the back for a second vehicle. The arrangement worked perfectly for me until Patricia Henderson moved in next door and was elected to the HOA board 6 months later. Patricia, or Pat as she insisted everyone call her, despite introducing herself as Mrs. Henderson, homeowner to new residents, was in her mid-50s with a blonde bob haircut that seemed to get increasingly angular with each passing week. She drove a white Lexus SUV that was always immaculately clean and had a personalized license plate that read, Pat Time. Every time I saw that license plate, I couldn't help but roll my eyes. Our first minor confrontation happened when she complained about the small collection of succulents I had on my front porch. Apparently, they weren't approved vegetation. I complied and moved them to my backyard, not wanting to make waves. The second issue arose when she claimed my garbage bins were visible from the street for 30 minutes too long after collection. Again, I adjusted my schedule to bring them in earlier, hoping that would be the end of it. But with Patricia Henderson, there was always something else. The color of my mailbox, the bird feeder in my backyard that was apparently attracting undesirable wildlife, the delivery packages that sat on my porch while I was in meetings. Each infraction, no matter how minor, warranted a printed notice in my mailbox, a text message, and occasionally an in-person visit where she would stand too close and speak in that artificially sweet tone that made my skin crawl. Marcus, honey, we all have to follow the same rules. It's what keeps our property values high. You understand, don't you? I'm just doing my job as a board member. I maintained my composure through it all, addressing each complaint while trying to minimize interaction. My strategy was working reasonably well until the carport incident. One rainy Tuesday morning, I was on an important video call with clients when I heard a car horn blaring incessantly from my driveway. I tried to ignore it, but after 5 straight minutes, I had to excuse myself from the meeting. When I stepped outside, umbrella in hand, I found Patricia sitting in her white Lexus, parked under my carport, repeatedly pressing the horn while glaring at me through her windshield. I approached cautiously, and she rolled down her window just enough to speak, but not enough to let raindrops in. Marcus, you need to move your car. I've been sitting out here getting wet. I blinked in confusion, rain pattering on my umbrella. I'm sorry, what? That's my carport, Patricia. She rolled her eyes. The street is flooded near my driveway, and I didn't want to risk water damage to my car. Your carport was empty, so I assumed you wouldn't mind if I used it temporarily. I looked over, and indeed my car was parked in the garage portion of my house because I had been bringing in groceries when the rain started. The carport was temporarily empty, but that didn't make it public parking. I'm in the middle of an important work call, Patricia, and this is my property. You can't just park here without asking. Her face tightened. Well, I'm asking now. Just move your car out of the garage so I can pull in there instead. The carport doesn't have walls and rain is blowing in. The audacity left me momentarily speechless. No, Patricia, I'm not moving my car. This is my property, and I need you to leave now. She glared at me for a solid 30 seconds before finally shifting into reverse. I'll be speaking to the board about this. There should be emergency provisions for these situations. You're being very unreasonable, Marcus. As she backed out, she deliberately drove through a puddle that splashed muddy water onto my shoes and pants. That evening, I received an email from the HOA with the subject line, Proposed Amendment for Community Emergency Vehicle Accommodations, which would require residents with excess parking accommodations to make them available to neighbors during emergency weather events. Patricia was listed as the contact person. I forwarded the email to a lawyer friend who confirmed what I already suspected. They couldn't force me to allow others to park on my property. She helped me draft a firm response to the entire board, not just Patricia, hoping that would be the end of it. It wasn't. The following weekend, I returned home from grocery shopping to find a white Lexus SUV parked in my garage. My actual garage, not the carport. The garage door was open, the vehicle was inside, and Patricia was nowhere to be seen. I sat in my car for a moment, trying to process what I was seeing. How had she gotten the garage door open? Then I remembered during a previous HOA inspection, she had asked for access to check some wiring that was supposedly visible from outside. I had given her the code to the exterior keypad, never thinking she would abuse it. There was a note taped to the interior garage door. Marcus, had to attend an emergency board meeting. My driveway is being resealed today, and I couldn't park on the street because of the construction on Maple. Used your garage since you were out. Thanks for understanding. Pat. I stood there, note in hand, unable to believe the level of entitlement. She had entered my property without permission, used my garage door code without authorization, and left her car in my space with nothing but a casual note, as if we had some prior arrangement. I closed the garage door, went into my house and changed the code on the keypad. Then I disabled the manual override button inside the house by removing its battery. Finally, I texted Patricia a simple message. I see you've parked in my garage without permission. The code has been changed. Please contact me when you return so we can discuss this breach of privacy. 3 hours later. Marcus, I need to get my car. Please open the garage. I waited 15 minutes before responding. I'm in a meeting. We'll be free in an hour. In the future, please don't enter my property or use my garage without explicit permission. 10 minutes later, my doorbell started ringing. I checked the security camera to see Patricia standing there, repeatedly pressing the button while talking animatedly on her phone. I decided to let her wait a bit longer. When I finally opened the door 30 minutes later, she had worked herself into a state of righteous indignation. Her face was flushed, and she had been pacing on my porch for so long that there were visible tracks in the welcome mat. This is completely unacceptable, she burst out before I could speak. I have been waiting for almost an hour. I have an important appointment, and you've essentially held my vehicle hostage. I could call the police for this. I maintained a calm demeanor, leaning slightly against the doorframe. For what exactly? You entered my property without permission, used a security code that was provided for a specific one-time purpose, and left your vehicle in my private garage without consent. If anyone should be considering calling the authorities, it would be me, Patricia huffed. It was an emergency. My driveway is being resealed. That's not an emergency, Patricia. That's scheduled maintenance that you knew about in advance and failed to plan for. You could have asked a friend to drop you off at your meeting or called a ride-sharing service. Just open the garage now. I'm already late, she snapped. I shook my head. We need to be clear about boundaries first. Do you understand that what you did was inappropriate and a violation of my privacy? She crossed her arms. You're blowing this way out of proportion. Neighbors help each other all the time. Help that is requested and agreed upon? Yes, not help that is taken without permission. I need you to acknowledge that you overstepped before I opened that garage. Patricia looked like she might spontaneously combust. Her face had turned a concerning shade of red, and I could almost see the steam coming out of her ears. For a woman who prided herself on maintaining control in the neighborhood, being held accountable was clearly a new and unwelcome experience. Fine, she finally hissed through clenched teeth. I should have asked before using your garage. Now will you please open it? It wasn't exactly a heartfelt apology, but it was probably the best I could expect. I nodded and reached for my phone to activate the garage door. And I'll need you to delete the old code from your phone, I added. It won't work anymore, but I want to be sure you don't have it. She reluctantly pulled out her phone, opened her notes app, and deleted something while showing me the screen. I then opened the garage door via my app. As the door lifted, Patricia marched past me without another word, got into her Lexus, started the engine, and backed out with far more speed than was safe in a residential driveway. I watched as she drove away, tires squealing slightly around the corner. I thought that would be the end of it. But the next morning I awoke to find a notice from the HOA taped to my front door. According to the official-looking document, my home office conversion was non-compliant with current codes and would need to be restored to original garage functionality within 30 days. This was a direct attack. The previous owners had obtained all necessary permits for the conversion, and I had all the documentation. The HOA had never raised this as an issue during my purchase or in the 3 years I'd lived there. It was transparently vindictive. My lawyer confirmed what I suspected. The HOA couldn't retroactively enforce a rule against a properly permitted conversion that had been previously approved. She drafted a response letter citing legal precedents and subtly hinting at potential legal action if they persisted with this harassment. That evening, I was still pondering the situation when I heard a car pull into my driveway. I checked my security camera to find, unbelievably, Patricia's white Lexus pulling into my garage again. The door was open because I had been bringing in yard tools earlier and hadn't yet closed it. I watched in disbelief as she parked, exited the vehicle, and walked out of the garage without even glancing toward my house. This time there wasn't even a note, just a brazen assumption that my garage was available for her use. As I watched her walk down the street toward what I presume was another HOA meeting, a calm determination settled over me. If she wanted to play games, I could play too, but I would make sure to stay firmly within legal boundaries. I closed the garage door using my app and went to the hardware store. An hour later, I returned with a heavy-duty padlock and hasp. I installed the hasp on the interior of the garage door, effectively preventing it from being opened from the outside, regardless of what code was entered. I made sure the installation was secure, but didn't damage the door itself. Then I sat down in my living room with a book and a cup of tea, positioning myself where I could see the street through the window. 2 hours later, Patricia returned. I watched as she approached my house, pressed the code on the keypad. Apparently, she had memorized the old one, despite deleting it from her phone, and then looked confused when nothing happened. She tried again, then pulled out her phone, presumably to check if she had the right code. After a few more attempts, she came to my front door and rang the bell. I took my time answering, counting slowly to 30 before opening the door with a look of mild surprise. "Patricia, what can I do for you?" Her artificial smile was strained. "The garage door seems to be malfunctioning. I need to get my car." I raised my eyebrows. "Your car? In my garage? Again? Without asking? After our conversation yesterday?" Her smile faltered slightly. "I was in a hurry, and you weren't home. I assumed it would be fine since the door was open. It's just for a few hours." "It's not fine, Patricia. We literally just had this conversation about boundaries and respect for private property. You're trespassing, and you've once again taken something without permission. Look, I don't have time for this. Just open the garage. The board meeting ran long, and I need to get home." "I've installed a manual lock on the inside of the door," I said calmly, "for security purposes. You understand, after finding unauthorized people entering my garage, I felt it was necessary." Her eyes widened. "You locked my car in your garage? That's illegal. You can't hold my property hostage." "I secured my own property after repeated invasions of privacy," I corrected. "Your unauthorized parking doesn't give you any rights here. But don't worry, I'll be happy to open it tomorrow morning, around 9 a.m. "Tomorrow morning?" she nearly shrieked. "That's outrageous." "And I needed you to respect my property and privacy," I replied evenly. "But we don't always get what we need, do we?" Her face turned red with fury. "I'll call the police," she threatened, pulling out her phone. "Feel free," I shrugged. "I have security camera footage of you entering my garage without permission, documentation of our previous conversation where you acknowledged doing the same thing was inappropriate, and a lawyer on retainer who will be fascinated to hear about the pattern of harassment you've been engaging in. I'm sure the officers will be very interested in all of that." She stared at me, phone in hand, clearly calculating whether this was a bluff. After a tense moment, she lowered the phone. "This isn't over," she said in a low voice. "The board will hear about this." "I'm sure they will," I replied smoothly, "along with my lawyer, and possibly the local news if necessary. I've documented everything, Patricia. Every notice, every text, every security footage clip of you entering my property without permission. If you want to escalate this, I'm prepared." Something in my tone must have conveyed my seriousness, because her expression shifted slightly from anger to uncertainty. She huffed, turned on her heel, and stormed off down the street, presumably to call someone for a ride. The next morning I woke early and prepared for what would likely be another confrontational encounter. At exactly 9 a.m., I heard a car pull up outside. Looking through the window, I saw not just Patricia, but also two other people I recognized from HOA board meetings, Howard Johnson, an older gentleman who had always seemed reasonable, and Diane Miller, a newer resident who had recently joined the board. Patricia had brought reinforcements. I took a deep breath, unlocked the interior padlock, and went to open the front door. The group was already approaching, with Patricia in the lead, looking grim and determined. "Good morning," I said pleasantly. "Right on time, I see." Patricia didn't return the greeting. "These are board members who have come to witness the situation and ensure there are no further misunderstandings." I nodded. "Excellent. More witnesses are always helpful when documenting inappropriate behavior. I've already activated the garage door. Feel free to collect your illegally parked vehicle." The garage door was indeed opening behind them. Howard and Diane looked uncomfortable, glancing between Patricia and me as if trying to gauge exactly what they had been dragged into. Howard stepped forward with an apologetic smile. "Marcus, Patricia has shared some concerns about ongoing disputes. Perhaps we could sit down and discuss this like neighbors?" "I'm always open to reasonable discussion," I replied. "But just so everyone's clear on what we're discussing, Patricia has repeatedly entered my property without permission, used my garage without consent, filed retaliatory complaints when called out on this behavior, and is now attempting to use HOA authority to continue this harassment. I have documentation of all of this, which my lawyer is reviewing." Howard's eyebrows shot up and he turned to Patricia. "You parked in his garage without permission? More than once?" Patricia waved a dismissive hand. "It was an emergency situation. He's blowing it out of proportion and retaliating by locking my car in." "Actually," I interjected, "I secured my own property after repeated unauthorized entry. The fact that she had once again parked there without permission is her responsibility, not mine." Diane looked troubled. "Patricia, you told us he had agreed to let you park there temporarily and then maliciously locked your car inside. That doesn't seem to match what I'm hearing." Patricia's face flushed. "He's twisting the situation. I left him a note the first time." "A note is not permission," I pointed out. "And there wasn't even a note this time. Just a blatant assumption that my property was available for her use." Howard cleared his throat. "Patricia, why don't you get your car, and then perhaps we should continue this discussion at the community center rather than in Marcus's driveway." Patricia looked like she wanted to argue, but instead marched to her now accessible vehicle and got in, slamming the door with unnecessary force. As she backed out, she nearly hit Diane, who had to step quickly aside. That afternoon, I returned from a quick grocery run to find Patricia's Lexus once again parked in my driveway. Not in the garage this time, but blocking access to it completely. This was beyond petty. This was deliberate harassment. I took photos from multiple angles, documenting the time and date, then called the non-emergency police line to report a vehicle blocking my driveway. While waiting for an officer to arrive, I also called a towing company. Officer Jenkins arrived about 20 minutes later and listened carefully as I explained the situation, showing him the security footage of the previous incidents and the documentation of Patricia's pattern of behavior. "So she's parked here to block your access deliberately after being told multiple times not to park on your property?" he clarified. "That's correct," I confirmed. "This appears to be escalating retaliation for me securing my garage to prevent unauthorized use." He nodded, making notes. "I'll document this and speak with the vehicle owner." I waited as he walked to Patricia's house. Their discussion lasted about 10 minutes before he returned. "She claims there's been a misunderstanding about shared parking arrangements in the neighborhood," he said, his tone suggesting he didn't find this particularly convincing. "I've advised her to move her vehicle immediately and to refrain from parking on your property without explicit written permission in the future. If the vehicle isn't moved within 15 minutes, you're within your rights to have it towed." 5 minutes later, Patricia emerged, shot me a venomous glare, and stomped to her Lexus. She backed out with her usual disregard for safety and drove away. The next day, I received an official-looking envelope in my mailbox containing a notice of an emergency HOA meeting. The agenda, parking violations, and property use restrictions. Patricia's signature was at the bottom. I attended the meeting with my lawyer. To Patricia's visible dismay, many residents had their own grievances about her selective enforcement of rules and retaliatory actions. What had started as her attempt to rally support against me quickly turned into a referendum on her conduct as a board member. At the next official meeting, Patricia was removed from the HOA board. 3 weeks later, she listed her house for sale. The day she moved out, our eyes met briefly across the street. I raised my hand in a small wave. She gave a tight nod before driving away in her Lexus, still with the PATTIME license plate. I never saw Patricia Henderson again, but her legacy lived on, in a more balanced HOA and a neighborhood that had come together against petty tyranny. As for my garage, I removed the padlock but kept the security cameras. Some lessons are worth remembering, even after the teacher is gone.